Jane Velez-Mitchell for Unchained TV with an extraordinary panel. We are covering the trial of Wayne Hsiung and Paul Picklesimer, two men who face more than a decade in prison for rescuing two piglets from a factory farm in Utah. We're going to talk to all of our experts, including famed attorney Lisa Bloom, Marina Bolotnikova, who is writing for The Intercept about this case, Gwenna Hunter, who is the founder of Vegans for Black Lives Matter, as well as Donny, founder of TheirTurn.net. But first, let's go to Cassie King, who is live on the ground in Utah outside the courthouse. Cassie, you're the lead communications director for DxE. Both of these defendants are one of the founders of DxE, another is a prominent DxE member. Lay it out. What is happening at this trial right now?
Thank you so much, Jane, for covering the trial. Like you said, I'm here in St. George, Utah, in southern Utah, and I'm right outside the courthouse where the defendants just went on a short lunch break where they have only 30 minutes to eat, so that's why they are not here with me. But what I can tell you is that jury selection just wrapped up after a day and a half. They finally have 9 jurors selected from a pool of over 100 jurors to begin with. And after the lunch break, those 9 jurors will be receiving jury instructions, and then we will jump into the actual trial, the opening statements, and hearing from quite a few witnesses on both sides in this case. Yesterday, we were not allowed inside the courtroom. As soon as jury selection began, the judge is trying everything he can to restrict media access, to restrict public access to this trial. That's why it's so helpful that we do have some invested journalists like Marina, who's here, and yourself covering this for more people to hear about this case. They're facing over 10 years in prison for an act of compassion that was in the interest of the public, exposing the world's largest pork producer, Smithfield Foods, owned by WH Group, although they just announced yesterday that they are selling Smithfield. Funny timing on the first day of trial. But the largest pork producer in the world, torturing animals, lying to the public about the continued use of gestation crates at their facility. This was a 2017 investigation and rescue. And 5 years later, the state of Utah continues to invest huge resources, taxpayer dollars, into prosecuting these whistleblowers and animal rescuers and trying to send them to prison for over 10 years.
Now, that was a great summary. One of the most fascinating things about this trial is that the actual video of the crime is not going to be played. Marina Bolotnikova, can you tell us, as a reporter who's covered this from the very beginning for The Intercept, what's going on there? DxE, which we'll show you in a second, videotaped the entire thing.
Yes, that's right. So this is a trial of 2 activists who went into a Smithfield pork factory farm in Southwest Utah in 2017. They went into a gestation crate facility and a farrowing crate facility. That's where farrowing crates is where they keep mother pigs who are nursing piglets. And removed 2 piglets that they say were sick and dying, and they have veterinary records attesting to that, and got the whole thing on tape, and have argued for their ability to show that to the jury, to show them exactly what happened and what their motive for going into this facility was. And the judge has disallowed that. That's a very, I would say that's a common thing in these animal rights trials. Footage of factory farms are, in the court's language, prejudicial to the jury, which means it's likely to horrify them and induce an emotional reaction, and likely to want to rule against Smithfield.
So, Lisa Bloom, you are an attorney who has worked for Court TV and other major outlets. What do you make of the fact that usually prosecutors are thrilled when they have the actual crime to videotape and they can show that videotape to the jury, but in this case, they don't seem to want to show it to the jury?
I think it's outrageous. And yes, of course it's prejudicial. So I know as a trial attorney, everything is prejudicial. Prejudicial means it makes the other side look bad. And it certainly makes these pig factory farms look bad for anybody to go inside and to see what is there. That's why very brave activists like Wayne and Paul do what they do at great risk to themselves, because they get these incredible videos that the world sees, and it causes a lot of people to go vegan, like me. And why shouldn't the finder of fact in this case get to see the video? Give them all of the evidence. Why are we shielding something? Well, it's obvious, because it makes Smithfield look bad for reality to be exposed. And that's very, very unfortunate. I think it shows a real bias against Wayne and Paul.
Wow. So not only that, but there's an anonymous jury, which I've been told by lawyers, and we've got a lawyer here, is usually reserved for like organized crime and terrorist organizations. So Gwenna Hunter, founder of Vegans for Black Lives Matter, what do you make of how this is all like the setup? I mean, the words there in the trial, the opening statements that are going to happen in a little while are obviously powerful, but if the jury is an anonymous jury, does that telegraph to them that, wow, these defendants are dangerous?
Yeah, and I think one of the words that keep coming up for me is emotion. The fact that they're doing all these blocks and all these type of moves, I feel like deep down, they know that this is wrong. Obviously, we all know right from wrong, regardless of what our financial motives are for this planet. But I believe they're trying to block empathy. They're trying to block people from feeling compassion, from changing how they feel about this entire movement. And like Lisa said, people can end up going vegan behind this and this shifting the entire paradigm, which is what DxE does. They do this work to help shift the entire paradigm and to shift the way people see animals, the way people see food, the way people view violence towards animals, just the way this whole system is viewed. And they've seen the power. I was listening this morning to a podcast with Wayne and Priya. And one of the things, I don't know if you're going to get to this later, but I'm going to do a spoiler alert and talk about it for a quick second. One of the things I thought was so incredibly powerful, apparently when Priya was going live on her page, the prosecutor was watching, and she had called for like a meditation, and she was emotional and she was crying, and they were showing other people getting involved. And apparently the prosecution had told Wayne, allegedly, that they're not seeking jail time. And it was a result of him watching Priya. It touched his heart. So this is a very emotional and I think historical trial.
Well, I got to say that it's one of the most unique trials in history. Again, videotape of the crime, alleged crime in progress, is absolutely gold for most prosecutors. So let's see what they didn't play for the jury.
So Circle 4 is a farm that processes and kills 1.2 million pigs every year.
We're about to head into Circle 4. This is the heart of evil. You can already hear the screams of the other pigs inside. They're cramped, they're suffering, and we're going to try and expose what's actually happening inside. You guys ready to go? Mm-hmm. Let's get our lights on.
That is truly horrific. So, Donny Moss, you are a renowned activist with TheirTurn.net. What say you about the fact that the jurors will not see that crucial video, which explains why Wayne and Paul Picklesimer went in the first place?
I mean, it shows to the bias of the judge, who has already indicated that if the defendants have any problems with the way he's ruling, they could take it up in appeal, as though his decision of course it's a jury trial, though his decision has already been made up. I was fortunate enough, in a sense, to be taken by DxE into a factory farm, so that the footage that you're showing is not unfamiliar to me. They took me to see egg-laying hens in a very large factory farm in California. And what isn't captured in this horrific video is the air quality and the smell. It is so much worse than any video can even portray. And, it's just really a shame that the jurors aren't going to learn the truth about what goes on and why the defendants felt an ethical obligation to go inside to expose what's happening. And of course, if they saw dying piglets, to rescue them and take them to a veterinarian.
All right. Now, Wayne Hsiung and Paul Picklesimer came out yesterday after jury selection, and they had some thoughts. They felt that the jury selection was not fair. So let's listen to this.
There's a broader pattern of suppression, for one, with ag-gag laws, the ATA, activists getting prosecuted in cases like ours that are just completely absurd from any common sense perspective. No one would imagine a prosecution for $42.20.
So, Lisa Bloom, we have a situation in various cities where police aren't even prosecuting anybody if they take less than $1,000. What do you make of the fact that these pigs are each worth about $50 each or less, and that this is obviously a very expensive prosecution?
Right. And how ironic that they're worth about $40 each to the pig farm. But of course, to those of us in the animal rights movement, these are individuals, they are souls, they have invaluable worth, and they're worth saving. And, Wayne really said it so powerfully that there's so much suppression of the animal rights movement. Most people love animals. Most people are sickened by what goes on at factory farms. And the reason why they're not vegan, and the reason why they buy leather and all of that, which I used to do years ago before I went vegan too, is because there is so much suppression, and people think that their meat on their plates comes from happy little animals frolicking around on green hills under the sunshine on a farm, right? And what Wayne and Paul are trying to show is what a hellscape it is for these individuals, these souls, pigs who are smarter than dogs, who are smarter than a 2 or 3-year-old human, right? And these horrible, miserable lives that they lead for what? To end up on our plate. So that's damaging to our health, because we know that meat is so bad for our own health, terrible for the planet, pollutes the air, the water, releases a lot of greenhouse gases. That's what they're trying to show. And to keep all of that out at the trial, it's part of, I think, our mainstream culture's see no evil, hear no evil when it comes to animals and meat. And that's why these things continue to just go on and on.
So let's talk a little bit about the jury selection process. As I mentioned, Paul Picklesimer, who was also charged along with Wayne Hsiung, had some pretty intense comments about the jury selection process and what they, as the defense, were not allowed to ask the jurors who are already anonymous. Listen to this.
The defense argued that because the questionnaire asks if you or someone who you know works in the animal production industry, yes or no, they were saying that will let you know if you have a bias or not. When we know that's not the case. People get tattoos of quote-unquote bacon. Like, we need to be able to really know what people are about, what they care about, how they feel about animals in general. And these are things we're just not going to be allowed to find out.
All right. So, Marina Bolotnikova with The Intercept, you have been covering this from the very beginning. Tell us about the intrigue and all the complexity surrounding every aspect of this trial to get a link to view the trial. Any of that has been extraordinarily complex. You were originally the pool reporter that was going to distribute the videos. Then they changed that and they gave it to a local news organization. And we don't really have an exact time on when we're even going to get the video of the opening statements.
Yeah, where to even begin with that? I would say that from watching, I have watched a number of pretrial hearings in this case, and it is, I think it's very clear that the judge is, He distrusts the animal rights activists. He's worried about what they would do if there's more transparency around the trial, or if the public were allowed in the trial. If the list of jurors' names were weren't anonymous, which would be the normal procedure. He listed reasons for making the jury anonymous that did, to me didn't make a lot of sense, and amounted to being afraid of this group of activists that has no record of breaking court rules or violence against people of any kind. And to what you were saying about media coverage, I have been more than 2 months ago, about 3 months ago, I contacted the court to try to secure permission to cover the trial, to record it. I was told in July that media would only be able to cover it via WebEx. I got permission to not only did I get permission to record and publish the whole thing, but I was told that I had to disseminate it to any other reporter who was interested in it. That's a technically challenging thing to do, but of course I was happy to learn it. And then last Thursday, abruptly, a few days before trial, and after we had made all these preparations to record the trial, that permission was entirely revoked. And this judge has sort of had a tendency to flip flop and sort of get cold feet about decisions he has made at the last minute, like he did last week, because he seems afraid of the media attention, and what's going to happen with open media access.
Can't hear you.
Yeah, you're muted, Jane.
Yeah.
I apologize. Let's take a look at the trial judge. We do have a photo, I believe, of him here. But before we do that, I want to go to what the New York Times wrote about this case. They did a big story on it after it first happened, before there were any charges filed. It says animal welfare groups have a new tool, virtual reality. And here are some of the quotes from the New York Times. So this isn't me saying this or an activist saying it. This is the New York Times in their report after viewing the video, the 360 video. In a portion of the film, Mr. Hsiung narrates dead piglets are piled up behind a sow who is wedged into a crate so tightly that she cannot move away from the mess, but a viewer can turn away from her to see and hear sows in similar straits all around her. So now if you look at the next page, Milford Farms, the actual pig operations responded. But let's talk more about what the New York Times said. The film shows sows with bloody and mangled teats, pregnant sows gnawing on the bars of the narrow stalls they live in until they give birth, and piglets clambering over nibbling dead siblings. Now, here is the response from Circle 4, which is owned by Smithfield Foods, which was bought in 2013 by the Shuanghui International, one of China's largest meat processors. The Smithfield spokeswoman said the video had blatant inaccuracies, such as assertions that the animals shown in it are being starved. So let me ask you, Donny Moss, you've been into some of these facilities. In this case, they used a 360 camera because quite often the companies will say this is distorted, it's heavily edited, they just pick one thing. So they went in with 360 cameras. Can you explain why that might affect what the company said regarding this is distorted?
Yeah, I mean, the companies always like to say that that it maybe wasn't even taken within the inside of our farm, because most of these factory farms look the same. They're just rows upon rows of caged animals. And so by using this 360 VR technology, they can provide some more context and prove that it is in fact inside of the factory farm where it took place. With regard to the animals starving, I mean, we know that animals starve to death in these factory farms, and not only because we've seen it in the footage, but I've seen it myself in person. When you have all of these animals stacked together in crates on top of each other or next to each other, there's nobody who's walking around to check on the welfare of each animal. Animals get caught in the cages, their heads get caught, their legs get caught, and they starve to death. It happens routinely. It's part of the cost of doing business. These are to the owners of these factory farms. These are inanimate objects who are disposable, and so they lose some of them. And that's the small cost of doing business for them.
So let me say this. Somebody commented, and I think it's probably the best comment of the day. Thank you for covering this. Why isn't CNN, ABC News, CBS, CBS News, NBC News, Washington Post, and other news outlets covering this? Lisa Bloom, you've graciously agreed to join us. You have been on many, many national cable shows. You often appear on national cable shows. What do you say to this question?
Well, they probably don't want to offend their advertisers, some of which are, big meat, big dairy industry. And Jane, as you often say, when you founded your own network, Jane Unchained, there is a media blackout on animal rights stories. At the same time that the vegan diet is catching on and more people are going completely vegan or going partially vegan, and vegan meats and cheese are skyrocketing, right, taking off, and people are really becoming aware of these issues and changing their own lifestyles as a result. There is still this massive blackout on these stories. And when they do cover these stories, they do it in a very patronizing way, as these animal activists, like we're all just a bunch of kooks and crazy, when in fact it's just very mainstream to love animals and to want to help them. And I just want to say one more quick thing about that quote from the New York Times that you just showed, Jane, because it was so heartbreaking to me, about the sows, the mother pigs, who are confined in a crate so small they can't turn around with their dead piglets. And I'm a mother. I mean, any of us who is a parent can only imagine being confined in a tiny little space with your baby who died, and the filth and the horror of that. I mean, these are sentient beings. These are animals that are sensitive and sweet. There's lots of videos online about people who have pet pigs, and they're very much like dogs. They're very sensitive, compassionate, sweet creatures. And it's just so intensely cruel what Smithfield did. And to even allow the dead piglets to be there with the mothers and not even remove them, it's just intensely cruel.
So, wow. Let me put a point on that by sharing a video of those pigs that was shot by DxE while he was in there. This is footage that the jury will not see.
So you can see most of these crates are intact, but some of them have literally been busted open because these poor mother pigs are so desperate to escape, they smash their faces up against these steel bars until there's a hole that's broken open, and they had to jury rig this crate door shut with tape. And you can see she's falling on the side of her face. She's got a nasty cut.
All right. What do you have to say about that, Gwenna? I mean, wow.
Yeah, if the jury saw that, game over. And that's what they're trying to prevent, because, I used to go to pig vigils, and so many people would come, and I brought a few people before that were not vegan, and it was a transformational experience for them because they got to look into the eyes of these animals, and they saw that there's a soul behind the body. They saw that there's an emotional energy and intelligence. They saw that the pigs were desperate and that they were aware of their surroundings and that something just wasn't right. So showing something like this could change the whole case. And you had sent me an article, I think, by Intercept. And I think this is quoted by DxE member Matt Johnson. He said, "A crime so heinous, a jury cannot possibly be permitted to see it, for fear it will cause them to decide it's not a crime at all." And I think that sentence right there describes why all these different maneuvers are taking place.
Wow, that's powerful. Marina, Bolotnikova with The Intercept. You've been monitoring this trial. I understand that we've got some breaking news. Well, there's some new information coming in about when the oral arguments are going to start. Are they starting now?
The jury selection wrapped up earlier this morning. The opening arguments are expected to begin soon. I'm told that they're starting at 1 Mountain Time. The other thing that I thought was worth mentioning in this conversation is that gestation crates are such a big part of what happened in this rescue, and just to contextualize them more for listeners, gestation crates are a standard practice in the pork industry of keeping female pigs kept for breeding in a cage that's not much bigger than their bodies. It is, it's as it would be like keeping a human in a coffin for their entire life. So these female pigs are kept in these tiny crates, where too small for them to turn around for most of their lives. They're artificially impregnated over and over again, and give birth to a few litters of piglets, and then when they're not productive anymore at that, they are slaughtered. And so gestation crates are one of the most controversial practices in all of factory farming. They have been banned. California has banned the sale of meat raised using gestation crates from anywhere in the country. So they have banned, pork raised in Iowa or Minnesota or North Carolina. Those are some of the biggest pork producing states, for sale in California. The pork industry has been fighting that law for years, and it's currently being heard by the Supreme Court. Oral arguments in that are happening next week, and I think it's unpredictable what's going to the outcome of that case. But I think that the odds for California's ban on gestation crates are not great, and I think it's really it's interesting and it's significant that that's playing out at the same time as this activist trial.
So Donny Moss, my understanding, and DxE has maintained, that this company had said that they were phasing out these crates and that they were getting rid of gestation crates. And that was one of the reasons why DxE went in there, because obviously they have not gotten rid of them.
Well, one of the things we've seen with these, when voters come out to the polls and vote in favor of eliminating gestation crates, and farrowing crates for pigs, and the where egg-laying hens, the battery cages, and the veal crates where those poor baby cows are confined to. Time and again, voters go to the polls and vote in referenda to eliminate these intensive forms of confinement. And time and again, we see that there's just like some small change, and the spirit of the law is not what's put into place. And so when I was inside of a factory farm in California, many years after the state passed a law as a result of a referendum eliminating battery cages for hens, I went with DxE inside of a factory farm with all kinds of humane labels, in front of the factory farm. And sure enough, it was filled with tiny cages. They were just slightly bigger than the cages that preceded them. And that was a way to sort of do an end run around the law. And so it's not surprising to see these companies making these commitments to eliminate them and then not doing so because there's so little enforcement, or just making a slight change that perhaps is within the law. You're on mute.
We are live, coming to you from Unchained TV for the trial of Wayne Hsiung and Paul Picklesimer, who faced more than a decade in prison for rescuing 2 piglets valued each at under $50. This has been a very expensive prosecution. Also, after they went into this factory farm in Utah and took out those two piglets and videotaped everything they did, the FBI was actually after them and trying to find the piglets. I mean, the FBI dealing with, look at everything that's happening in the world. They had teams of FBI agents who were actually going into sanctuaries looking for these two piglets. We have an extraordinary panel. We have Lisa Bloom, a famed attorney. She often appears on national TV, and we know each other from Court TV. We have Marina Bolotnikova, who is reporting for The Intercept, which is an award-winning publication. We have Gwenna Hunter, who is the founder of Vegans for Black Lives Matter, and also Donny Moss, the founder of TheirTurn.net. I'm Jane Velez-Mitchell, the founder of UnchainedTV, and we are bringing you this trial, which is just absolutely extraordinary. So I want to start with Maria. Tell us what's happening now. For people who are just joining, where does this trial stand at this moment?
It looks like the trial might be finally be opening up to the public right now. I just successfully got into the WebEx event. So the last day and a half they have spent on jury selection, and which went longer than expected because yesterday morning the parties showed up to trial and realized that the court had given the prosecutors a list of the full names of the people in the jury pool, but they, to the activists and their lawyers, they gave only a list of a redacted list with the jurors' last names missing. So they didn't have the opportunity to do research, like social media research on the jury pool. And that delayed jury selection for hours. The defense, one of the defense lawyers wanted to declare, moved for a mistrial because obviously that's unfair. But this judge seems determined to push through this trial as quickly as possible. So he kept it going. He kept jury selection going for I believe until 8 p.m. Utah time yesterday. They were in court for 12 hours. And now we will finally be getting to opening statements soon.
So this trial is unique because the defendants videotaped everything they did when they went into this Utah factory farm and took out the two piglets, and the prosecution is not allowing them to show that videotape. And we're going to talk about that on the other side, but here's some of the footage the jury will not be allowed to see.
She'll be stuck here for at least 4 years, sometimes 5 or 6 years, living in a crate this size, forcibly impregnated over and over again, and then finally killed when she can no longer produce as many piglets as this farm wants her to produce. Once it becomes unprofitable, she'll be killed. She'll never step outside her entire life. So this is a farrowing crate. This mother pig was taken from a gestation crate facility to here to give birth. She's going to be with her kids for 3 weeks, and then they're all going to be taken away from her and soon sent up to slaughter.
Wow. Lisa Bloom, you've covered many gruesome crimes. This is a crime case. And the question is, what is the crime being committed? Is the crime being committed going in there and videotaping that and showing it to the world? Or is the crime being committed what is being done to these animals by the tens of thousands, indeed by the millions?
Yes, Smithfield should be the one on trial for this intense cruelty. I can barely stand to look at that video, and I think any decent human would be appalled to see a mother animal with all of her little newborn babies in this horrific metal enclosure where she and they never see the light of day. As if they are not sentient beings, as if they are not individuals who want to just live a life of peace and without suffering, just like any of us. The crime is being committed by this giant ag business and the cruelty that they perpetuate. And I agree with Donny that all of these measures where some of these other companies say that they have humane practices, let's get real and just be very honest. There is no such thing as humane meat. Meat comes from suffering of sentient beings. It is wrong. That's what Wayne and Paul so bravely tried to expose. And now that they are being put on trial, it's just outrageous. And apparently the judge feels that it can't even be a fair trial. So they can't show their own evidence. They can't show how peaceful and calm and kind that they were being in there and why they were in there. We can't have that because we can't have the jury know what really happened. That's very disturbing.
And I have to say that both men on trial, one's the founder, co-founder of DxE, Wayne Hsiung, and the other is a prominent member, Paul Picklesimer. And the judge, I believe, has reacted to certain things that DxE has done. For example, this happened while this trial was gearing up, and another similar event happened just in the last few hours.
No. Oh my God. Oh, that's so funny. Security is just like, hey, what they doing? They're not gonna be like, hey, what is she gonna do? She protester. Tackle her. Tackle her. Oh! Hit her head and everything. Oh no! Oh, now they're going to jail. Two of them, yeah, now they're going to jail.
So that was a DxE action in protest of the trial. Two young women were arrested. They were wearing T-shirts that said "Right to Rescue," which is the whole argument of the defense, saying just as if there was a child in the hot car and you saw the child foaming at the mouth, you would have a moral obligation to go in there and break the window and commit the crime of breaking and entering to the car to get the child out, that this is the same concept. Just to follow up with you, Lisa, on that, what do you make of that as a legal argument, being an attorney yourself?
I think it's a very strong legal argument because you have the right to come to your own defense or the defense of others. And I would also use the analogy of a dog in a hot car. You know, most people love dogs and would actually rescue a dog from a hot car. Well, why not a pig? I mean, there's very little difference. They're also very intelligent animals and very sweet animals, and many people have them as pets, right? And I initially went vegan many, many years ago because I looked at my dog and I thought I would never want her to suffer. I would always do everything to help her and take care of her. Why would it be different with any other animal just because I don't know them? So that's many people have this story of why they went vegetarian or vegan because of dogs. I think dogs are like our ambassadors to the animal world. So if we could rescue a dog, and many people do, and God bless them for it, why not rescue a couple of piglets, which are baby animals who can't fend for themselves and which would have surely have died if Wayne and Paul had not rescued them? That's absolutely a strong legal defense, and it's a travesty of justice that they're not allowed to use it in this trial.
I don't even understand, Donny Moss, how you can present a defense. If your entire defense is, I went in there because I heard that Smithfield had said they were getting rid of pig gestation crates, which are highly controversial, which Prop 12, California voters overwhelmingly banned the sale of any products that come from these gestation crates. It's now being fought in the Supreme Court in the coming days. So it hasn't been implemented yet. But if that's your entire reason for doing this, what are you going to say in your opening statements if you can't talk about animal welfare or animal rights or animal suffering at all?
Well, it'll be interesting to see how Wayne is able to spin this, and Paul Picklesimer's defense attorney too. We know for certain that they're not allowed to show the crime being committed, but Jane, do we know for certain that they're not even allowed to talk about it in the opening statement?
Well,
has it been established?
I've been told that is not something that they are allowed to talk about. Now, that would be something interesting to see how far they go. And Lisa, from covering trials, a lot of times attorneys will try to get around it, and then the other side will go, objection. And if they do it too many times, the judge says, approach the bench and scolds. And if they continue to do it, there can be certain punishments, in essence.
Yes.
Yes.
And I would say, as a trial lawyer, I'm always listening for that sound. What sound of the door being opened? Does the other side open the door? So even if a judge has said you're not allowed to introduce evidence of why you went in there and you're compassionate and you want to save animals, if the prosecution opens the door by talking about their motive, for example, I'm going to be on my feet the next time the jury is out and say, Judge, the door has been opened. I think I should now be allowed to introduce this evidence. If the judge says, no, I can't, but I now have an issue for appeal. If the judge says yes, great. So as you point out, Jane, a trial is a very dynamic experience. You have to be a good listener as well as a good oral advocate for your clients. You have to be listening very carefully for things that might come out in the middle of a live trial that could be very helpful and that could change everything.
So Gwenna Hunter, as a prominent activist watching this and a social justice advocate, I mean, you were one of the first people in America to make the connection between the Black Lives Matter movement and racial injustice and food injustice and food security and all of those intersected issues. What are your thoughts on the greater political implications of this trial, given that, yes, we're covering it here? I mean, look, Lisa Bloom is a famous attorney. I was on TV for 40 years. Where is the mainstream media on this? Okay, we're sticking our necks out and doing this on an independent basis because it's almost equivalent to the days when people used to manufacture little leaflets and hand them out in a repressive society. It's hard to get this information out when mainstream media doesn't pay attention to it.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, with this system being the way it is, a lot of things get rigged. And I think that's what's happening here is there's a rigging that's going on where so many things are being blocked out. Even with, Black Lives Matter, there's some major stuff going on that is so devastatingly unfair to them. And it's not getting the coverage that it deserves because if people knew, it would be in their favor. So certain things get blocked out because we know that there's narratives created in our world, in our society, in our country to keep certain things flowing in a very specific direction. And I think I had shared with you, Jane, that I wasn't initially following the information about the trial because I'm so used to charges being dropped. I'm like, oh, he always gets out of it. They always get out of it. So I wasn't even focusing on it because I just assumed that it would happen. And then when I talked to you and I'm like, wait, this is actually happening and this is going to trial and this is a big deal. And I think I was listening to the podcast this morning with Wayne and Priya, and they didn't sound super confident themselves that, they may get out of this. Like it sounded like they were concerned that there will be some type of jail time. And with so much of what DxE is doing, the past year, I mean, they do some really bold, amazing work. And as activists, we're like, yes, yes. But as, the industry watching, they're like, okay, I think they're making an example out of them. And that's what's happening.
You're nodding your head, Lisa.
Yeah, I think you make a very good point, Gwenna, and making an example out of them, let's pull together all these different threads. So Jane, you talked about the FBI getting involved and doing an investigation for, what are two pigs that are worth less than $80 combined to the industry. I believe that their value is incalculable because they're individuals who have souls like we do. But the FBI never gets involved in a tiny, tiny little case like this. They're doing it to protect this giant company, Smithfield, right? This giant multi-billion-dollar company that's responsible for so much pain and also pollution of the air and the water and release of greenhouse gases. Let's not forget. But they're doing it to protect them. And I think, Gwenna, you really nailed it when you said they're trying to make an example out of Wayne and Paul. They don't want other animal activists peacefully, non-violently as they were, going in, recording, saving the lives of animals, because it makes big ag look terrible. And so they're trying to protect them. But that should not be the FBI's role. You know what? Smithfield can take care of itself. It is a giant, very wealthy company. They don't need the FBI, having their back. I think it's appalling that the FBI got involved, that this is made into such a giant case, and that these two men are facing 10 years in prison for rescuing these piglets.
And Donny Moss, a lot of people aren't even aware that this is a Chinese-owned company. This is not anymore an American company.
Right. I mean, I definitely. However, I think Americans, think bacon. The Thanksgiving turkey, meat, and Americana are like one and the same. So it's no surprise that the government is going out of its way to protect the big interest of big animal ag, regardless of who the owner is. I just want to circle back to one point about DxE. I mean, the defendants here could have taken a plea and made this whole thing go away, but they wanted to go to trial because they want the world to see what's going on, and that happens through a trial, through media coverage of the trial. And so that's always been part of DxE's strategy, to get to court so that people in the mainstream would see this information. Well, this trial takes ag gag to a whole new level by really so heavily restricting the media's access to the trial. I mean, the New York Times probably would have wanted to be there covering this. They've covered this case in the past, as would other major media outlets, but they're being restricted. I mean, it goes to show the power of big animal ag over our government. And it also,
well, I want to say one thing. I don't think they're being, I think the New York Times can figure out a way. If we can figure out a way to cover it by hook or by crook, I think the New York Times can certainly figure out a way to cover it. I think that, they give it some coverage and then it's willy-nilly. It's not like this is an important issue that we need to be on top of. It's occasional. And, there are famous people who are weighing in. If you've just joined us, we are talking about the ongoing trial right now. Opening statements should be starting in about 10 minutes of the trial of Wayne Hsiung and Paul Picklesimer, who went into a factory farm and rescued 2 piglets. You're looking at them right there. It was in the New York Times when it happened 5 years ago, but the coverage now does not seem to be very intense in the mainstream media. However, notables have spoken out, and I want to play this from Peter Singer. He is considered the father of the animal rights movement. He is a renowned professor, winner of many awards, writer of many, many books. Here's what he had to say about this trial.
Hi, I'm Peter Singer. I'm professor of bioethics at Princeton University, and I'm concerned about the fact that Wayne Hsiung is facing prison for rescuing 2 sick and dying piglets from one of the nation's largest pig farms run by Smithfield. People who do this, try to stop this cruelty, should be applauded, not convicted of crimes. And what's particularly absurd is that the court has ruled that the footage of the conditions of the pigs is too horrific for the jury to see. It's so horrific, and yet the court is protecting the pig farms that do that, instead of allowing the jury to see the truth about how pig meat is produced. Thanks for listening, and I hope you'll join me in supporting Wayne Hsiung.
What is your response to that, Lisa?
That's beautiful. I'm a huge fan of Peter Singer. His book, The Life You Can Save, was really life-changing for me. And he talks about moral choices. So for somebody at his caliber to be speaking out on video on behalf of Wayne and Paul is very moving to me. And I think he just really nails it. If you're talking about moral choices, who is the moral actor here? Wayne and Paul trying to save the lives of sick and dying piglets, or this giant industry that's so intensely cruel that they have to do everything possible possible to keep it hidden, keep it behind closed doors. Don't let people see what's going on. Just quickly, if you're vegan, nobody has to hide a field of corn or a field of lettuce or blackberry bushes, right? They're beautiful. They're out in the open. You don't have to hide them because they're wonderful. But the meat industry has to have this secrecy and hide and walls and locks and don't let anybody in and don't let anybody see it, because it is so intensely cruel. And Wayne and Paul exposing to the world what was going on in there was so incredibly important. And I agree with Peter Singer. They should be applauded, not criminalized.
And I have to ask a follow-up question. There are a lot of grounds, it would appear, for appeals. But like when these decisions are being made, like it has to be an anonymous jury and, you can only watch it on WebEx, but you can't record it off WebEx. There are a whole slew of things that the defense is very upset about. But you can't appeal it till after the trial's over. That doesn't make any sense to me.
Well, correct. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Gwenna.
No,
so that was to me. Oh, I saw her. Sorry. So yes. So first of all, if they win, if they're acquitted, then the case is over. There's no need for an appeal, right? If they are convicted of anything, then yes, I think a lot of this is going to be decided at the appellate court. So keeping the media out would probably not be grounds for appeal for them. Some media organizations can appeal that if they want. But what directly affects them at the trial are these rulings that they can't let the videos in, that they can't assert the defense of coming to the aid of another to save the piglets. All of these rulings, the anonymous jury, that's very weird and suggests that there's some kind of dangerous mobsters or something. When you can see Wayne and Paul, how gentle and sweet they are. And I've spoken to Wayne, he's a Buddhist. Has a mindfulness practice, meditation practice. He's about as peaceful a human being as exists on this planet. So all of this kind of stuff, I think definitely will be grounds for appeal if, God forbid, they lose and they're found convicted of crimes.
Wow. So if you're just joining us, we are doing live coverage of the trial of Wayne Hsiung and Paul Picklesimer, who are there rescuing the pigs. For what they're doing in that photo, they could face 11 years in prison each. The trial is underway in Utah, and the jury is not going to be able to see video of the actual breaking and entering, if that's what you would call it, allegedly, because the judge has said, no, you can't show that video. Usually the prosecution is thrilled when they have video of the alleged crime in progress because it's a slam dunk. Look, there they are doing it. So in this case, they are not allowed to show it. And the sense was that the jury would become so emotional that they might make an emotional decision. In other words, they might decide this wasn't a crime at all. This was what the defense calls open rescue. So listen to what one of the defendants, Paul Picklesimer, says about jury selection and how they weren't even allowed to ask people about their feelings toward animal activism or animal rights.
The defense argued that because the questionnaire asks if you or someone who you know works within the animal production industry, yes or no, they were saying that that'll let you know if you have a bias or not. When we know that's not the case. People get tattoos of quote-unquote bacon. Like, we need to be able to really know what people are about, what they care about, how they feel about animals in general, and these are things we're just not going to be allowed to find out.
So as an activist yourself, Donny, I mean, what's your reaction to that?
I mean, they're creating a situation whereby the jurors are not going to know why these guys went in there in the first place and what they saw. They're just going to be told that these felony theft occurred, and that's what they're going to be told to rule on. And that's wrong. I'm not a lawyer, but as Lisa just explained earlier, that's not how this should be done. And as an activist, I hope and if they are convicted, then I really hope that in appeal the alleged crimes can be shown so that the world sees what happened.
But I have to say, Gwenna Hunter, as an activist who's been at many protests and events and outside courts and city halls, people are not that stupid. This is not a huge town. They can see that there's protesters everywhere. There are demonstrations. I mean, you'd have to really have your I don't like to use the word blinders, right? Donny Moss did a documentary called Blinders about carriage horses, so we don't want to use that word. But you'd have to really have your eyes and ears shut to not see that there's something more that going on with this trial. Do you think it might possibly backfire, Gwenna?
Well, from my understanding, and I could be wrong, well, maybe it's the previous trial. Is this particular town that they're in, don't they have a lot of employees by Smithfield or in the surrounding
Actually,
areas?
what happened was they were originally in the town Beaver, where this was close to where it happened, and Smithfield was the major employer in that town. And because of certain things that sheriffs were caught on camera doing vis-a-vis the leafleters and the protesters from DxE, basically saying things like, we don't want you here, obviously saying things that obviously betray that they were very biased against just the existence of these protesters in their town. They got a change of venue, and now it's in St. George, which is in Washington County, which is not as close to the company, but I don't know. I'm not in Utah. I wouldn't be able to say if there were a lot of people who were somehow connected, but it's definitely considered improvement over being in the original spot. Lisa?
Yeah, but I think that's a great point, though, Gwenna, because what about other people whose family members may work in the meat industry? What if they do themselves? Denying a defendant the right to ask jurors these kinds of questions is a big violation of their constitutional rights. So here in California, where I primarily practice law, I also practice nationwide, but mostly in California. We have broad latitude to ask potential jurors questions, and I take advantage of it. I want to know everything about them. I want to know where they work, their family members work, if they have any kind of a bias. I would be asking them, what kinds of feelings do they have about the meat industry, about animal agriculture, about animals confined in small cages, about pigs and piglets and eating pork. I want to know everything, and I would be allowed to ask that here in California. In Utah, they may have different rules, but we still have the U.S. Constitution. And so I think the restrictions on what the defense attorneys, in this case, attorneys for Wayne and Paul, were allowed to ask the potential jurors is going to be a big issue on appeal. I think it was far too restrictive so that they don't get to ask these jurors questions. And I also heard Marina, the reporter for Intercept, say that they weren't even allowed to know the last names of the potential jurors. I mean, that's outrageous. So you can't Google them. You can't look up their social media. I mean, that's just standard practice for trial lawyers like me. Like, I get all the names, all the information, immediately want to go, what if somebody had posted on Facebook, death to animal activists? Go pork, go Smithfield, right? I mean, we should have the right to know that. They have the right to a fair trial. And I think so far it's really been abrogated.
Yeah. And I mean, to me, what stands out as the biggest shocker is that the video of the crime being committed, the alleged crime of Wayne and Paul going into this factory and videotaping with 3D cameras, 360 cameras, that's not going to be shown to the jury. So let's take a quick look at just a snippet of, they did extensive videotaping, what the jury will not see.
And she'll be stuck here for at least 4 years, sometimes 5 or 6 years, living in a crate this size, forcibly impregnated over and over again, and then finally killed when she can no longer produce as many piglets as this farm wants her to produce. Once it becomes unprofitable, she'll be killed. She'll never step outside her entire life. So this is a farrowing crate. This mother pig was taken from a gestation crate facility to here to give birth. She's going to be with her kids for 3 weeks, and then they're all going to be taken away from her and soon sent off to slaughter.
Wow. I mean, that's emotional. And Donny, they would make an emotional decision. I don't know if anybody could look at that without being sad. And by the way, I want to say that that is not the most gruesome. I've looked at some of the footage, and I just chose not to show the most gruesome because it's blood and it's feces, and I think it would chase everybody away, or a lot of people away. But so they're not supposed to make an emotional decision.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and also I would just add to that, Jane, so many of the pigs have open wounds, and just imagine the agony that they're experiencing. And what I mentioned earlier is that what you can't see in video is the putrid, is the smell. The air is so dense and the smell is so oppressive that when I was inside of a factory farm with DxE, that was more overwhelming to me than the sight of the horrors that were unfolding in front of me. So I don't know if that addresses your, I'm not sure what your question was, Jane.
Well, I mean, of course you'd make an emotional decision,
Right.
but the idea that they can't explain why they went in, I can't wrap my head around it. I mean, like even in murder trials that we've covered, Lisa, the defense is able to explain. Look at the Jodi Arias trial. She was on the stand for 18 days talking about every little thing that she and the man she stabbed 27 times did. And why she felt the need to do this and why she felt the need to do that. And we all listened to it, and it was admitted into evidence, and she was still convicted. But the point is that, is there even a defense if you can't explain why you did something?
So you remember the old movie, You Can't Handle the Truth? It seems like the judge thinks that the jury cannot handle the truth and that the community cannot handle the truth, because the truth is going to crack them open. Imagine if, you, like most people, you eat meat, you eat pork, maybe your family members work at these facilities. I mean, people don't want to face the reality. It's very painful. And the judge is going to keep it from them to preserve the status quo, to protect big ag, and not let anybody see what's going on. And I appreciate the tough editorial decisions you have to make, Jane, about not showing some of the more disgusting videos. And also Donny describing the smell, because I think that's very overpowering. And by the way, animals like pigs have a much stronger sense of smell, stronger olfactory sense than we humans do. So imagine what it's like for them living their entire lives with that putrid smell, some of which is rotting dead animals of their own species. I mean, it is horrific what goes on behind closed doors at these plants. And that's what Wayne and Paul were trying to expose.
And we've got some breaking news. The trial is now officially underway. The jury is apparently seated and opening statements are going to begin. And it's going to be very interesting to see how long these opening statements are going to go on. Because when you think about it, if the defense can't talk about why they went in, then the prosecution, well, I don't know. Maybe they can talk about it because the rules are so skewed in this case. But I think that the court wants to really narrow as much as possible this case into a very narrow issue of, were these folks inside this private enterprise? Were they outside? And did they remove these 2 piglets? And if that's determined, then case closed, according to the prosecution. But we've seen a lot of trials. I've often called trials, especially celebrity trials and famous trials, runaway freight trains. Everybody has their idea of how it's going to go. Then you get into the courtroom and it goes a totally different way. Just to use an example, the Michael Jackson trial, it was considered an open shut case, absolutely open and shut. The district attorney, Tom Sneddon, I was right there almost celebrating before it started, telling the media, spent a lot of money in my town, and guess what? Michael Jackson was acquitted. So do you see that possibility of, the best laid plans of mice and men going askew here for the prosecution, Donny? Possibly or not?
I mean, perhaps. I mean, if I've been on a grand jury, and I recall I'm not a lawyer, but when I served on a grand jury, I was able to ask questions of the prosecuting attorney, of the DA. And so I can't help but wonder, will the jurors, if they're not getting information as to why the defendants entered this factory farm and took pigs out, are they going to be able to ask why? Is that a possibility, Lisa?
I don't think so. Generally, if you're asking, can the jurors ask questions? I don't know what the rules are in Utah. Sometimes they can. That's actually a really interesting point. If the jurors want to ask a question and they want to ask a question about something that the judge has disallowed, normally the judge will just say, well, we can't answer that question. We can't get into it. A lot of times when they're out deliberating, that's when they start sending out notes. And, the judge may just not answer some of their questions. But the fact that if they do it during the trial, while there's still testimony going on, it's so great for people like me as a trial attorney, because then I have a sense of what at least one of them wants to know. And these are only 9 jurors in this Utah trial. So I would love it if one of them would do that. But, I guess it remains to be seen how the judge would handle it.
And Jane, I'm sorry to jump in as though I'm the moderator here, but
take it away. You can have
it. Are these jurors sequestered somewhere, or I know that they're not supposed to sort of look into the case that they're in front of, but if a juror is curious, can a juror go online and do a search and learn more?
I think that some of the jury selection process was done via WebEx. I don't know if they are going to be on WebEx for the entire trial. That is a question that would be very good to have the answer to, because then the whole idea that they see that this is not an ordinary trial when they walk into the courthouse, that's moot. They're just
I can tell you something about that. So no matter how many times jurors are told, don't read the news, don't go home and Google it, don't go on social media, we know that they do. They do. And even if they're told not to, they do. So I think it would be very interesting if we find out later that some jurors did the investigation, maybe even saw the video that was disallowed. I mean, I don't know if I think, Jane, are there protests out in front of this courthouse? Are there activists with signs or even showing videos out in front of the courthouse?
Yes. Well, last night after jury selection, Wayne came out with Paul Picklesimer, the 2 defendants, and they spoke to a cluster of media. I was really looking at the media to see, is it mainstream media? It didn't appear to be. It appeared to be a lot of activists and independent media, such as ourselves, UnchainedTV. We are an independent media outlet, and we cover these cases that are ignored by mainstream media. Because guess what? We don't put commercials up. So we're not beholden to the meat, dairy, and pharmaceutical industry. So that's one of the reasons why independent media like the Intercept, like a lot of these organizations are covering this trial where mainstream media is not. So he did speak, though, for quite a bit. There was applause. They both spoke. In fact, we have a little clip of what Wayne said last night, and we can play that for you right now, and you can get a sense of what it was like outside the court last night. And let me look at it right here.
There's a broader pattern of suppression, for one, with ag-gag laws, the ATA, activists getting prosecuted in cases like ours that are just completely absurd from any common sense perspective. No one would imagine a prosecution for $42.20.
So there he is again. Lisa, isn't there something where if the price is below a certain amount, it can't be a felony?
Yes. And I think what the state of Utah is charging them with is breaking and entering, as well as stealing the animals. So they've enlarged it to become a felony, but it's still, of course, ridiculous.
Yeah, so people are asking questions. The case is now live on WebEx. Yes. Now, the case is live. We've gone through quite a bit of changes to try to get this WebEx feed, and we are not allowed to broadcast it. Sure, we'd love to show you what's going on in court right now, but that is not allowed. When you register for the WebEx feed, there is a whole decorum order, and it's absolutely verboten to show you any of the WebEx feed. Now, originally, a reporter, Marina Bolotnikova, who was on our broadcast a bit ago, had the right to record it on WebEx. And her idea was she was going to turn it around on WebEx and record it and put it up on Twitter and here, there, and everywhere. And the court then at the last minute said, no, your access is denied, and we're going to give it to the St. George News. Now, at that point, the St. George News is going to have a camera. They have a camera purportedly in court right now. So I've been writing to the St. George News, when are we going to get the video? And actually the reporter, after a couple of days, was quite nice. Maybe they had to assign a reporter. He said, yes, I have the video. Here's the WeTransfer download. When the video comes in, I will give it to you. And I said, but how soon? He said, well, I've also got to do my own story, so I'll do the best I can. So we have no idea, and nothing against him personally, but we have no idea when we will see that footage. It could come in at midnight tonight. Or please watch our continuing coverage, because we're going to be here live tomorrow. And we are also live on UnchainedTV.com. And so we are simulcasting this all sorts of places. And we will hopefully have that video and be able to play it tomorrow. That would be the whole idea. And then we can all comment on that. But, this is a high-tech age. It would be very easy if, let's say, I had the WebEx, which I do have the WebEx link, it would be very easy for me to record it and turn it around and show it to everybody. So that's not happening. But the trial is underway right now as we speak. We're so honored to have Lisa Bloom, who's a very busy lady and who's taking the time to talk to us today. She runs a major law firm here in Los Angeles and is quite often on major television shows. And we both worked on Court TV together. In fact, I often filled in for Lisa when she went on vacation. And my dear friend Donny Moss, who is in New York City, who runs TheirTurn.net, an independent journalistic enterprise to bring the stories that don't get reported by mainstream media. And people are saying they're angry and asking, isn't that censorship? Well, the truth is, though, Donny, I'm sure you know this, the courts have a lot of discretion. Like, we can complain about this, but for example, let's go back to the Michael Jackson trial. That was not streamed live to the world. People think in the wake of the O.J. Simpson trial, which was streamed live, and certain other trials like the Jodi Arias trial, that, every trial streamed, and it's just not the case, Donny.
Yeah, by virtue of giving access to this one local media access, maybe they're fulfilling whatever obligation they have to make the trial public. And I would just bounce this over to Lisa. Does it vary by state, or is there a federal law regarding media access into courtrooms?
So good question. And the answer is yes, it does vary by state. So some states like Florida have sunshine laws, cameras automatically get in. Other states, it's case by case, like California. There were cameras in for the O.J. Simpson case, but not for the Michael Jackson case, as Jane points out. And, I think Utah is one of those case by case states. But this is ridiculous, Jane, as you point out. I don't think they should be able to favor one media outlet after another. I'm glad that we have at least a camera in there, and the St. George Press, gets access to it. But come on, it should be the equivalent of a pool camera, which is what we used to have at Court TV. Some responsible media outlet is responsible for setting up the camera, keeping it still, not being disruptive. And all the studies are, by the way, that cameras in the courtroom have no effect on a trial. That people, in first glance, they look at the cameras and then they completely forget about it and they just try the case like they always did. But what's important about this case is the defendants are usually the ones who object to cameras. You're on trial for some horrific thing. You may not want that broadcast to the world. And the defendants are the ones who have the right to a fair trial. So the defendants are usually the ones who object. And I believe that was the case for Michael Jackson, for example. Here, Wayne and Paul, the defendants, want cameras in. So this should be a no-brainer. And you're right that in this day and age with technology, it should just be streamed out. Whoever wants to watch it can watch it. We say sunlight is the best disinfectant. People have a lot of concerns about our criminal justice system. I myself have many concerns about it because we have a lot of problems. Well, here is a chance for people to see the inner workings of the system that, by the way, our tax dollars pay for. The judiciary is a branch of the government. It should be transparent, just like the legislative and executive branches should be transparent. We should get cameras in. It should be streamed. That's the beginning of the end of it. And by the way, I want to say one other thing for people who are watching. What you can do right now is post on your social media about this case in support of Wayne and Paul, and say why, and whatever your thoughts are. Draw attention to this. Use your voice. You'd be surprised what an impact your social media posts have on people who know you and who are connected with you. It has a big impact. So please use your platform to raise consciousness about this important case.
Yes, and Tom Vincel, who says he's in Facebook jail, wants to know, could a mistrial be declared because they're not allowed to show videos or state their case? Lisa.
Yes. Well, no, probably not going to be a mistrial, because that would require the same judge who made these rulings, barring them from introducing this important evidence, to then reverse himself and say, oh, actually, I was wrong. I made a big mistake, and now there's a mistrial. I mean, that's just not going to happen. It's just, human beings don't do that. But I think what you mean is, could the holding, if Wayne and Paul are convicted, could it be reversed on appeal because of that? And I think the answer there is yes, it very well could be.
And we've got a very lengthy statement here. Sorry to block your face. Let me put you on a different angle there.
Okay.
Okay, here we go. Comments from a kinder world. Kinder world. How corrupt is the legal system in the U.S. when it comes to the meat industry? Not only has the judge ruled against showing, hearing, or even talking about any footage taken by the defendants too, he also ruled to have an anonymous jury, which could lead jury members to think the defendants are dangerous. 3, at the last minute, the judge removed live streaming and documentation right of a journalist who had previously been given permission. Yes, and absolutely, you are right about all 3 points, because actually Marina Bolotnikova, who has been a guest earlier today, she went into court. She's actually watching on WebEx on another computer, but she went into the courtroom virtually via WebEx. She was going to, since she had been given access as pool reporter, videotape it by screen grabbing it, screen recording it on her laptop, and then playing it. And she would also play for us. So I was also denied. I applied a while ago, and I was told your request for cameras in the courtroom has been denied because Marina is the one who applied first. So go to her for video. So after we went to her for video, all of a sudden she was denied. And one of the things that was said in the email was that there were so many requests for video that we decided to change. Well, guess who was the only person who requested, according to Marina? Moi. I was the only person who requested.
But, even if there were a lot of requests, that just shows how important and newsworthy the case is. And again, just have a camera in there, just live stream it, and then everybody can use it for however they want on their own platforms or their own shows. I mean, that's ridiculous. And again, it's really inappropriate for a court to favor one media outlet over another. And Jane, I mean, I think everybody knows you, but you are a very well-respected, experienced journalist and media person. Yeah, keep going. Yes. Day after day, week after week. No, but you really are, Jane. I mean, you hosted your own show on HLN for 6 years. You were on Court TV for many, many years, and many other shows. You are very well respected. And if they won't let you get the feed and to be able to comment on it, to me, this just goes back to, what do they have to hide? Why does there have to be so much secrecy? Why do they have to keep out the video and the important evidence? Why don't they want us to see what's going on? And that's because what's going on in that courtroom is shameful. I mean, let's just be honest about it. Wayne and Paul are not allowed to present an adequate and fair defense. They were not allowed to question the jury appropriately. I mean, what is everyone so afraid of? Why can't we get the truth? A trial is supposed to be the search for truth. And it seems like in this case, there's only one truth that they're interested in, and that's the truth, quote unquote, for Smithfield.
Well, here's what they might be afraid of people seeing. This is some of the video, not the worst of it, but some of the video that shows pig gestation crates, which the voters of California in Prop 12 have voted to ban. And yet that's also being fought by the pork industry in the Supreme Court. It's going to be heard any day now, actually, in the Supreme Court, with the pork industry trying to overturn Prop 12, the will of voters in California, because California, if it were its own country, would be the 5th largest economy in the world. So if it gets banned here in California, it basically has ripple effects across the world. But these are the controversial pig gestation crates that are at the heart of this.
So you can see most of these crates are intact, but some of them have literally been busted open because these poor mother pigs are so desperate to escape, they smash their faces up against these steel bars until there's a hole that's broken open, and they had to jury rig this crate door shut with tape. And you can see she's falling on the side of her face. She's got a nasty cut.
Oh boy. And you know, I just took little snippets. I'll be honest with you, just looking at that footage to grab the snippets and upload it, it's so depressing. It really brings you down. Like, who would design something like that to keep pigs in crates the size of their bodies, Donny, unable to turn around or even scratch themselves? And they go mad. They just go mad and they bite on the bars and they break their teeth and they hurt their faces just trying to get out. Like, you know, it's kind of sad, but the administration sided with the pork producers against the people, the will of the people of California in the Supreme Court case. The government is siding with the pork industry.
The gestation crates are truly medieval torture devices. And on this farm alone, there are 35,000 of them. That's how many pigs, sows are in these crates at any given time. This particular farm, if you can call it that, factory farm, has 300 industrial sheds and how many, and 100 manure lagoons. I had to look down at my notes to refresh my memory. 100 manure lagoons. Those are massive cesspools filled with their waste, which contaminate, as Lisa referenced earlier, we haven't really touched on this, all of the water table, the air in the neighboring towns, which are invariably lower income areas. And so these guys, Paul and Wayne and the others who are no longer part of the case because they took a plea deal, I mean, they were doing extraordinarily important public service by going in there and exposing not only what happens to the animals, but also what these farms do to the environment and to the local communities around them.
Yes. You were going to say something, Lisa.
I just say something about that too. You're so right, Donny. And these disgusting, horrific pig manure lagoons, the 100 of them just at this facility, as Donny's pointing out, are also major contributors to climate change because they release a lot of methane gas, which is a very harmful greenhouse gas, far worse than CO2, which is what everybody wants to talk about. You know, the animal ag industry is a major contributor to climate change. So, you know, we're all experiencing extreme weather now, extreme heat waves and the horrible hurricanes and floods and fires in the Southwest, much of it attributable to animal agriculture.
So what's next in this case? So let's say, for example, that they are convicted, which according to people who have watched these WebExes, it seems like the judge allegedly has implied that they're going to be convicted. So where does the appeals process go? How soon does that happen? And presumably they would remain free during the appeals process, right?
Well, that's a big presumably. I don't know if that's the case in Utah. I don't practice law in Utah. They may not. They may become incarcerated immediately if they are convicted. And we are saying that they're facing 10 years in prison, and that's true. Normally, for a first offense, somebody would not get that kind of a sentence, even if they are convicted. But the way that the judge seems to have a real bias against them, anything can happen. And so they could go to prison. Appeals, in terms of how long it can take a year or two. It can take a long time. It's, you know, the legal system, one of the great crimes of our legal system is how slowly it moves. I have to tell my clients and all my civil rights cases that I do, you know, if you want to file this case, it could be 3 or 4 years until we get to trial. So in the criminal system, this has gone to trial a little bit faster, although it's like this happened in 2017, right, Jane? So here we are, 2022. It's taken 5 years for this to go to trial. And by the way, imagine the stress of this hanging over you if you are Wayne or Paul. And imagine the courage it takes not to take a plea bargain, get a slap on the wrist, some minor crime, pay a fine, but to say, no, you know what? I'm going to go to trial, because these are men of great character and honor who want this story to be told, who insist that they did not do anything wrong. In fact, they did something that was very important and worthy. And that's why they're going to trial. I mean, going to trial, whether you're a criminal defendant or even in a civil case, a plaintiff or defendant, it is one of the most stressful things a human being can go through. And that's what they're going through. And if they're incarcerated, they're going to have to, become incarcerated for some period of time until the appeal's heard. And if they lose the appeal, they're going to have to stay in there until their sentence is served. I mean, it's just outrageous. And by the way, people of Utah, is this what you want your tax dollars going to? I mean, you want these people to be prosecuted? You want them to be incarcerated? Think of the huge costs of everybody in that courtroom. It's about $50,000 a year to incarcerate an inmate. That's where you want your tax dollars going? I mean, think about it from that angle.
Lisa, can I just ask a quick question just about the process here? Because let's just say hypothetically that they're convicted. Does sentencing happen at a later date?
Yes.
And if so, then could they be granted an appeal before the sentence, which would then?
No.
Okay.
No, appeals take a long time. So sentencing often happens later, although in this case, the judge could impose the sentence right away. The judge could be ready to go with that. But the appeal, you file a notice of appeal, within 30 days. They can ask for a new trial after the trial's over. It's kind of pro forma. It's very rarely granted because, again, you're making the request to the same judge who now you're alleging made all these mistakes. So it's very unlikely that you're going to get a new trial, but that comes. And then you have to file your briefs on appeal. You have to certify the record for appeal. It's a big job. It's a big project doing an appeal. And then the other side gets time to respond, and then you get time to respond. And then there's an oral argument date that gets set. So I would say 1 to 2 years for the appeal.
And what's interesting is that because there is a suppression of this information, again, this is a very significant trial. And the New York Times did cover it initially, doing a story about virtual reality, because that's essentially what they did when they went in there. They had 360-degree cameras. And the New York Times did say that there were dead piglets piled up behind a sow who was wedged into a crate so tightly that she could not move away from the mess. And also said that showed sows with bloody and mangled teats, pregnant sows gnawing on the bars of the narrow stalls, and piglets clambering over and nibbling dead siblings. Okay. Now, I do want to say that Circle 4 responded, owned by Smithfield Foods, which was bought in 2013 by Shanghai International, one of China's largest meat processors. The Smithfield spokeswoman said the video had blatant inaccuracies, such as its assertions that the animals shown in it are being starved. But, if there's little piglets eating their siblings, I don't know. What does that say? Because Donny,
video doesn't lie.
Yeah, well, that's an interesting point there. I mean, that's really the heart of this case, is that, where's the videotape?
Right. Video doesn't lie. These companies always say, we don't do anything wrong. We treat the animals so humanely. Then why is it that every single time brave animal activists like Donny or Wayne or Paul, every time they go in there, they can very quickly and easily get footage of cruelty to these animals? Because it's not economically feasible for companies like Smithfield to have veterinarians come in and take care of sick animals. They just let them suffer and die because that's free, right? Having the vets come in is expensive. Having humane conditions is expensive. And they just want to make money. These animals mean nothing to them. They don't care. They just want to be economically profitable. So, of course, what the animal activists are saying is true. And if anybody has any doubt, there's video to back it up.
Well, so you're saying that essentially if they're convicted, they could put Wayne and Paul in prison, in jail, pending an appeal.
That's correct.
After sentencing.
I'm sorry to say, yes.
Yeah. What impact might this have on the movement, Donny? You're with TheirTurn.net. You do so much activism. We know that in past cases where there were long prison terms given to some animal liberationists, that it did have an impact on the movement. I think it scared people a little bit.
Look, of course, it is scary, and but I don't think that many animal rights activists who are willing to make big sacrifices are going to let the government scare them into not doing the important work of exposing what goes on behind closed doors. So I still think that you're going to continue to see, and also the laws vary from state to state, country to country. So there have been activists in countries all around the world, some of whom are part of DxE, who have gone into factory farms, chained themselves to the cages without masks and stayed and brought the media in with them and exposed. And I think we're going to always see that until this system, which is inherently broken, is shut down for good.
Lisa Bloom has stayed with us for quite a while, an hour and a half. We want to thank you so much, Lisa, for taking the time to bring us your expertise. You are my hero. Wow. I am so honored to have you on Unchained TV. And hopefully we'll see you once or twice again before the end of this trial. Thank you so much.
For sure. Thank you, Donny. Thank you for the important work that you do. And Jane, you're the best. Thank you for hustling to make this happen. This coverage is so important. So thank you. Thank you for including me.
Thank you for coming on. We really appreciate it. And so I think what we're going to do, Donny, is see if we can, we've still got quite an audience going. I want to show, first of all, if you're just joining us, we are covering the trial of Wayne Hsiung. It's going on right now. The opening statements are happening as we speak in Utah. And I want to show you what Wayne had to say walking out of court last night. Toward the end, not the exact conclusion of jury selection, but just some of his thoughts.
There's a broader pattern of suppression, for one, with ag-gag laws, the ATA, activists getting prosecuted in cases like ours that are just completely absurd from any common sense perspective. No one would imagine a prosecution for $42.20.
All right. What do you make of that? The fact that all of this is over, piglets who are worth less than $50 each, and it's been pointed out to me by numerous people that a lot of crimes now, if they don't reach a certain financial level, like shoplifting, they're not even prosecuted.
Yeah, they're clearly trying to make an example out of the defendants, and they're trying to scare activists into staying away from factory farms. We all know there's a reason why these factory farms and slaughterhouses, don't have windows and are far away from public places and have big gates and barbed wire around them. They don't want, as Paul McCartney said, if these slaughterhouses had glass walls, everybody would be a vegetarian. So the government is trying to make an example out of these activists. But Jane, imagine the optics of locking up activists who rescued dying baby pigs from a hellish situation, especially at a time where you have people who committed an insurrection at the Capitol who are walking away, violent insurrection, who are walking away with, free. It's mind-blowing. And I wonder if the judges, if the government have to consider the optics of locking up people who rescued baby pigs and took them to the vet.
Yes. And that the backstory here is really fascinating, that the FBI stepped in after this, what they call the defense open rescue, what the prosecution calls a crime, occurred. The FBI went to various sanctuaries and at one point cut the ear of a pig to get a DNA sample. And that became a story. And the story was kind of like embarrassing to the FBI. Wait a second, we're living in a time of I could go on and on about all the problems we face, and you're chasing pigs in sanctuaries. So that was kind of an embarrassment for the FBI. It was in national papers. And I believe that certain members of Congress even were like, what's going on here? This is ridiculous. But that is the law of unintended consequences. Do you think something like that could happen with this trial? Let's say they're convicted. And, also, if they're not convicted, that would be also a major embarrassment. But let's say they're convicted and then they appeal and they win on appeal.
Yeah. Yeah. And look, that's really possible. We know how powerful big animal ag is, but when the public gets wind of what's happening and what this trial is about and what these activists did, then there could be some pushback in the court of public opinion, and that could make a difference. And that's why it's so important that people who are watching this live stream go onto our social media accounts and share this live stream, share the news coverage about the trial, hashtag right to rescue, educate our friends and family about what's going on. And we need to continue to shine a spotlight in whatever way we can, even if we're not willing to go in and risk our freedom and our safety and our security like Paul and Wayne are, but do whatever we can as individuals to expose the truth about what's going on in these places. You know, it's so hard to even watch the footage that you show Jane, and you're not even showing the worst of it. But there was a famous Broadway actress called Gretchen Weiler who's passed away. But I remember she said, "We must not refuse to see with our eyes what they endure with their bodies." We have to look. We have to see what's happening. We have to get others to take their blinders off. I'm going to use the word blinders, take their blinders off and look at what's happening. Because, Jane, people like me and you and Lisa and the other guests on the show, we saw this footage, and it affected change in our lives, as it has millions. And so if people are exposed, if people have the information, then they're going to make changes too. And eventually there'll be a sea change. But right now the government is moving mountains, and Animal Ag is moving mountains to ensure that people don't see the truth behind the walls of these factory farms and slaughterhouses.
And we want to show you, if you're just joining us, what the jury will not see. And it was a very long 360-degree video. In fact, some high-tech companies lent DxE the video to go in there into Circle 4 farms in Utah and videotape everything they saw. The reason being is that companies often say, well, that was taken out of context, it was distorted, it was edited. So they just did a 360 video of everything going in and going out. And that's what the jury will not see. We'll play you right now a snippet.
So Circle 4 is a farm that processes and kills 1.2 million pigs every year.
We're about to head into Circle 4. This is the heart of evil. You can already hear the screams of the other pigs inside. They're cramped, they're suffering, and we're going to try and expose what's actually happening inside. You guys ready to go? Mm-hmm. Let's put our lights on.
All right, that was very, very disturbing. And it's not even the most disturbing part. I mean, that is truly the sounds and the screams. You just get a taste of it. By the way, we're getting updates from Marina Bolotnikova on Twitter. She's saying the defense attorney said, quote, "What's been described to you as a barn is actually an industrial. Before prosecutor objects, the judge doesn't let her finish the statement." What do you make of that?
I mean, again, this is an example of the government taking just an extreme measure to ensure that the public doesn't know the truth. This censorship, it's just so unconstitutional, and it has, far-reaching consequences. So, like you said, Jane, we have to do a run around the mainstream media, which refuses to show these images. We have to do a run around the court system, which refuses, in a case about this video, is they're not allowing people to describe what's happening. We've got to move mountains ourselves to ensure that this information gets out. It's infuriating to know that the defense attorney was cut off before she could get her first sentence out about industrial farms. People look at the footage that you just showed, Jane. Nobody would describe that as a farm. It's not, when people think of farms, they think of pastures and animals grazing outside in some sort of bucolic setting. These are factories, they're warehouses, they're sheds. And these companies like Smithfield, I mean, as I said earlier, this particular farm has 300 of those sheds. And I've been in these sheds. You can't see from one end to another. This particular factory farm or shed, 35,000 gestation crates spread out among the different sheds. It's like stepping into the depths of hell. You saw a little bit in the video that you just showed, Jane, but what you can't really see, obviously you can't get into the minds of these pigs who have been intensively confined for who knows how many years. They're artificially inseminated. They give birth over and over. They're shifted into other crates, which were equally horrible, where their newborn babies sometimes get crushed under their weight, and they die from their injuries and from starvation because they can't access the sow's teats to nurse. They have gaping wounds. They're chewing on the bars of these crates to escape because they've gone insane from the intensive confinement. Some of them have blood dripping down their faces. I've seen this footage. I've seen the horrors firsthand inside of a factory farm because DxE took me and my camera inside of a factory farm. And I was shocked because before we even entered the shed, and as you saw Wayne entering that shed, there was like a plaque, and I'm not going to name names, but from a certain humane association certifying this farm is humane. And then you walk in and it's the most inhumane thing you could ever imagine until you've been into one of these places and breathed in the air and taken in the smells, which are suffocating, and seen the agony firsthand. It's just not to be believed.
Well, we're getting some breaking news from those who are monitoring the WebEx. And what we're hearing from an attorney who advises DxE is that the judge just sustained an objection to the opening. She considered it a bad ruling. The defense attorney was saying that the farm in Utah is not the same kind of farm she grew up with, where animals get to go outside. The judge shut her down. Okay. So this is what's happening. Now, there was a lot of talk apparently about how the farm worker discovered the break-in. It's like almost like, let's stay on the minutia and not look at the bigger issue.
Yeah. I mean, at some point, the jurors are going to have to ask, if they're not being told, why were these two individuals in this place in the first place? What prompted them to go inside? I mean, it could be that the prosecution, the district attorney, who was, I believe, the attorney general for, I believe the prosecutor is the attorney general for the state of Utah. And this individual has gotten campaign contributions from Smithfield Foods, which to me seems a bit surreal. I guess that's legal, or perhaps that wouldn't be happening in a courtroom and like it is today. Something doesn't smell right there for me. But I could come back to bite the prosecution and the judge if the defense isn't allowed to defend themselves.
I want to point out that we are going to be covering this trial live all week long here on Unchained TV, Facebook, UnchainedTV.com. We are broadcasting from our desktop. So you can also just go to UnchainedTV.com and watch the coverage there. And we are a global streaming network to promote the plant-based lifestyle. So we have a point of view, just like MSNBC and Fox News and all the rest of them have a point of view. That doesn't mean we play with the facts. And the fact is that this is a very controversial trial. Now, we're getting reports from Marina Bolotnikova, who is covering the trial for The Intercept. She says, the prosecution has repeatedly mispronounced Wayne Hsiung's surname as Swing, and it's Hsiung. So that's another fascinating thing now that I just can't believe that.
I mean, that sounds like something Donald Trump would do. That really, they're going to discredit themselves even more than they already are by inserting sort of a racism into this trial. It's so strange that they would even go there.
Wow. I mean, how long can you be in a case without knowing how to pronounce the name of the defendant and mispronouncing Wayne Hsiung as Wayne Swing? That's weird. That's just odd.
Yeah.
Whoa. That I've never heard of, mispronouncing a defendant's name. Donny, let me ask you, when you look back, I'm sure there were times in history where it didn't seem like such a big event at the time. But then when you look back, you recognize it as a major turning point. Do you think it's possible that this trial could become a major turning point in history?
either this trial itself or the group of trials, similar trials. Anita Crimes, the pig trial up in Canada, which was global media attention. And, and I'm hoping the same is true for this trial ultimately. We're at a moment in time where people are making very big sacrifices at a time where the law is clearly not on their side, on our side. And that's where you see change. You see change. We know from history, change happens in the discomfort zone. Change happens when people are willing to risk their safety and their freedom and their futures for a just cause. So if it's not this trial, it's the collection of trials that are happening at this time in history that will change the trajectory in the future.
And so many people, to try to get the word out, these two women disrupted an NFL football game wearing the Right to Rescue t-shirts. And I could show you a little video of what happened with them. And that apparently got back to the judge, and he was not happy about it. This happened shortly before the trial started a couple of weeks ago. And another similar disruption happened, I believe, just last night or the night before.
No. Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh, that's so funny. Security is just like, hey, what they doing? They're not gonna be like, hey! What is she gonna do? Protester. Tackle her. Tackle her. Oh! Hit her head and everything. Oh, no. Oh, God. Oh, now they're going to jail. Two of them, yeah, now they're going to jail.
So those are the two activists who went to jail, again, wearing the Right to Rescue t-shirts and essentially saying they did this to protest the fact that Wayne Hsiung is being put on trial. And that apparently, and another similar event, either yesterday or the day before, upset the judge, apparently, because there was apparently a reference to that when discussing who could go into the trial to see the trial in person. And, that's what people do when the mainstream media that should be covering this case is not. I mean, why isn't this like on the front page of the New York Times, Donny Moss?
Right. I mean, yeah, of course, this is such an important trial, a potentially precedent-setting trial, the Right to Rescue. So this should be getting massive mainstream media coverage, and it remains to be seen if it will. In the meantime, the individuals who you saw run into the field with those flares, those smoke flares, they'll be marginalized by a lot of people. A lot of people will make fun of them, but there are going to be some people who see the writing on their shirts, Right to Rescue, and will search and will learn about what they're doing. And there will be some media coverage there is media coverage of some of these stunts to get attention. For years, PETA was criticized for doing, I'd rather go naked than wear fur protests. But as you said, Jane, sometimes you have to do something provocative to cut through the clutter. There is so much noise. And if you want your message to be seen, you have to provoke, you have to disrupt. And these are important messages. These are life-saving messages. Factory farms, animal agriculture is destroying our health. It's destroying the planet, and it's terrorizing animals as we speak. They have to do this work, and they're heroes for doing it.
And I want to let everybody know that we at Unchained TV are going to be covering this trial all week long. You can also watch it. By the way, kind of a historic day. This is the first day that we've gone live on our website, and it's practically killed me, to be honest with you. Excuse me. Our website, UnchainedTV.com, and our app, we are going to be upgrading now to live coverage often. And what better way to start than with this outrageous trial? So please download our app. You can download the Unchained TV app on your phone. It's very easy to download Unchained TV. It's a free app, 100% free. You can just go to your app store on your phone and download it. I urge you to do it right now. You just put it in and you just put it in your app store, hit Unchained TV. It comes right up. You don't have to give your email. We also have a portal to our streaming network on UnchainedTV.com. And this is live right now on UnchainedTV.com as we ramp up live coverage. As Lisa mentioned, I worked at CNN for 6 years. And before that, at many other news organizations where I was pretty much live, either as a reporter, an anchor, or a TV host. And so I really envision giving people shows so that, let's say, Donny Moss in New York can talk about what's happening in New York activism. Hopefully, Lisa Bloom would talk about the law and animal activism or veganism or both. And so we can truly become the vegan CNN. That is the plan, but we need everybody. It's going to take a village to get that together. So I really urge you all to download the app. You can also download it on your TV via Amazon Fire Stick, Apple TV device, or Roku device. You can just literally, Apple TV device, put in Unchained TV, it pops right up. Amazon Fire Stick, put Unchained TV in there, it pops right up. We have more than 700 videos at this point, documentaries, cooking shows, travel shows, talk shows. This is going to be going up on the app as well. So what we're really trying to do is, as we've heard before, do an end run around mainstream media and the blackout on this kind of content. So Donny, you're an affiliate of ours. Your videos, your incredible protests, for example, against Nike killing the kangaroos, and your in-store demonstrations against Nike are on there. A lot of dramatic content. Do you see alternative media, now that media is changing so rapidly, and we can, what's a network? A network is a fancy name for a production company with a distribution channel to an audience. We have a network and we are going to expand it. And I want you to be a part of it. And I want everybody watching, if you have videos, if you have cooking videos, if you have documentaries about animal rights or veganism, send them to us. Reach out, direct message us on Instagram, Unchained_TV, and we will get your documentaries. Donny Moss has several documentaries and videos on Unchained TV. The reason I bring this in is that we're going to be providing daily live coverage. So this is our launch into live coverage. We've been live for years on Facebook, but now we're going to be live on our website and on the app, Unchained TV. And we hope to reach a global audience, a different audience. And we're also live on all the other platforms. We're live on Twitter. We're live on LinkedIn. We're live on YouTube. So Donny, do you have any thoughts about, this trial? One of the comments was, where's CNN? Where is CBS? Where is New York Times? Where is the Washington Post? Now, we want to be wrong. Nothing would make me happier than wake up tomorrow morning and see this story on the front page of the New York Times. Nothing. And I will eat vegan humble pie. But, it hasn't been, it's been sporadic at best.
Sometimes we do know that sometimes the Washington Post and the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal do cover these open rescues that DxE has done. I mean, DxE there have been large stories in these papers, but I think all these media outlets are skittish about reporting on what goes on inside of these factory farms because of their advertisers, many of whom are restaurants and stores and companies that sell meat, dairy, and eggs. We also know that, viewers consume those products. And so, perhaps there's, to some extent, and Jane, you might know this better than me, having been an anchor at CNN, but perhaps these media outlets don't want to scare their viewers away by showing them what you're showing on the screen right now, the truth of what happens behind closed doors at these factory farms. And so that's why I would encourage everybody who's watching this to use the hashtag #RightToRescue, follow Direct Action Everywhere on Twitter and on other social media platforms. They've created a new handle for this trial I think it's called the Smithfield trial on Twitter, where you can get updates, you can retweet. And, if the mainstream media isn't going to do it, then the burden falls on our shoulders as people who care to get the word out about this trial and about the animal agriculture in general, its impact on our health, on the animals, and on the planet, a planet which is in trouble.
Absolutely. So yes, we have hope. And, we obviously don't have the audience that one of these major networks has, but I will say, I was allowed to do a weekly animal segment when I had my show on CNN, Headline News, and they didn't stop me for 6 years. As long as I had the show, I was able to do that segment. And I did cover pig gestation crates, but it was the exception. I was the outlier. And, so I just never want to say a negative word about that, because I'm always grateful that I was allowed to do that. And, when I got hired, I said, would you mind if I did a little animal segment once a week? And they probably thought, yeah, pet adoption or something. They said, no, we don't see a problem with that. Well, they might not have Googled me to the extent that but no, they didn't stop me. So I am always happy about that. But for me, it was a lesson. Wherever you are, you can use whatever you do, whatever your talents are, and whatever situation you're in, to speak for animals. No, it didn't make me particularly popular, to put it mildly, but we got it done. And that was also the genesis of this nonprofit, UnchainedTV, because I decided to do it full time after that show ended, having been in news media for 40 years already. So we're just getting started. Again, we urge everybody to download the global free vegan streaming network, Unchained TV. And also to come back tomorrow, we will be continuing to cover this all week. We've got, a couple of minutes. We're going to end at the top of the hour. But Donny, talk to me about what you would like to see. What do you think is your best case scenario for this trial?
No, the best case scenario for this trial would be obviously an acquittal and massive mainstream media coverage, exposing what goes on inside of factory farms, just showing what the crime that they committed was. If that would be a major victory in and of itself, if that video footage got into the mainstream media showing the crime, I think that would be, and of course that they were acquitted, I think that would be a major victory, and it would potentially set precedent for future people to be able to rescue animals who are in dire straits inside of these industrial warehouses that people describe as farms.
Yes, and we are monitoring the trial now tomorrow, okay, because there is a pool camera in there. And by all rights, they're supposed to give us that video at the end of day. So I will stay up as late as I have to get that video. And Donny, I think you could also download it. You're in a news organization, and we could turn that around and show that to you tomorrow. So I am hoping that you join us tomorrow at 11 a.m. Pacific, which is noon Mountain, which is 2 p.m. Eastern, right here. You can join on Facebook, or you could also go right to our website, UnchainedTV.com. It's going to be right on the homepage as it is today. And check in, because this trial, I believe, is going to go down in history. And I think that the more people who are aware of the trial, the more people who watch and share out the coverage that we have, the better it will be. And it's just absolutely extraordinary. I think we will be able to find out what kind of an opening statement Wayne Hsiung, who is representing himself, talk about bearing the lead. That was something we probably should have mentioned earlier. Wayne Hsiung has said he is going to represent himself, which the judge said he was very much against. So what can Wayne talk about in his opening statement if he is not allowed to talk about animal welfare, if he's not allowed to talk about why he rescued? If you heard just a second ago, which we're getting notes from the trial, that the judge shut down, the judge just sustained an objection to the opening. The defense attorney said that the farm in Utah is not the farm she grew up with, where animals were able to go outside. The judge shut her down. So what can they talk about? I mean, it's like, how could you possibly even put a sentence together, Donny?
Right. When you started the live stream 2 hours ago, I asked this question. I said, I understand, I don't agree with it, I think it's terrible, but that the video of the crime isn't going to be shown and the judge is prohibiting that. But how can he prevent in the opening statements the lawyers, one of whom is also the defendant, from explaining why the alleged crime was committed in the first place. It doesn't make any sense. So I really am eager to see the opening statements and to see what happened.
Wow, we've got breaking news. We've got, okay, the opening statements must be done because Marina Bolotnikova just tweeted the prosecution's first witness, Richard Tofan, farm complex manager at Smithfield Foods, quote, "I've worked for Smithfield for 25 years. We produce protein." Now, whoa, that is, so wait, the defense can't say that it's not the farm it used to be, but the prosecution witness can say we produce protein? That is wild. That is absolutely wild. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, as a guest said earlier on the show, Gwenna, it does feel a bit rigged when the judge is so openly biased against the defendant, so much so that before the trial even started, maybe in sort of pre-trial motions, if that's the right phrase, he was making reference to an appeal in such a way to suggest that the defendant's already lost the case. I mean, the bias in this particular case has been staggering. So I'm not surprised, I guess, Jane, to hear that that the prosecution is allowed to say whatever it wants and the defense is not.
Wow. I mean, I honestly, I almost can't believe this because our nation is founded on the idea of freedom of expression, fairness in the court system. And I covered trials for years. I know there isn't fairness in the court system. I used to sit there in court waiting for a famous case and see the other defendants come in with their public defenders and be whisked off to prison in a move that's so fast that they hardly knew what was going on. And then when the celebrity defendant shows up, everything slows down because they have the high price attorney and everything becomes very careful. So I personally have seen that justice is not blind. It has 20/20 vision in a lot of cases. So yet, I'm just wondering if this could end up backfiring on the judge, because if this becomes like sort of an embarrassment in being overturned and the higher court says, well, this was clearly a biased trial, could that in the end be sort of like the backlash or the boomerang on this, Donny?
I mean, it seems like the judge is eager to limit the scope of what's shown and discussed and to get this trial over quickly, almost as if he doesn't want to be presiding over this trial. So, but I do get the sense from the news that's coming in and from everything that we heard before that he's shooting himself in the foot. This is not going to, and if this truly is a sort of a precedented making case and it does go down in the history books, this judge is going to look awfully foolish by stripping the defendants of their constitutional rights.
We've got some more breaking news. We hear from one of the attorneys who is monitoring the WebEx feed. I asked, did Wayne make an opening statement? And the answer is no, he waived. Not sure why, probably wants to save it for his testimony. It is harder to shut him down as a defendant testifying than as a pro bono lawyer. So your thoughts on that Wayne waived his opening statement?
Look, Wayne does things his own way. He's a visionary. He's really smart. Some people would say that it's not a good idea for him to represent himself. But Wayne seems to have a vision often that the rest of us don't have and can see 5 steps ahead. So I hope he knows what he's doing. He's among the smartest people I've ever met. He had a vision for DxE, Jane, as you may recall. He had this vision, and the vision, he has seen that vision through. I mean, he's doing exactly what he said he was going to do, which is shine a spotlight on factory farms, go inside, take some of the victims in the worst trouble out, and expose this. And he's doing what he said at it, years ago when it was just a few people in San Francisco. So I would like to think that his decision not to have an opening statement was based in some sort of rational decision that was the best choice for the trial.
Wow. So this, honestly, I think this trial is going to go down the history books just for being unique. I've never seen a trial where there's no opening statement by the defense, and I've seen a lot of trials. So it's an anonymous jury, we're being told, but the jury has shown up in person. Okay. No one is allowed to show their faces, which is standard. I've been to numerous trials where the judge issues an order to say you're not allowed to videotape the defendants, the jurors. You can't show the jurors. So that's normal. So the jurors are there in person. Okay. But that is significant because if they have to walk into that court or drive past those protesters, they have to know that this is not an ordinary trial. Your thoughts on that?
That they're going to see the protesters. That's going to beg several questions in their minds. They're going to see that the judge is refusing to allow answers to those questions, and they're going to go home and do the research on their own, perhaps. And they're going to get the information on their own terms, and that might be worse for the judge than just allowing the video to be shown in the first place.
Wow. Well, we've been on for 2 whole hours. I know you have to go to a protest. I would like to stay on all day. However, the time has come to wrap up this day, but come back here tomorrow. We are getting started 11 a.m. Pacific, noon Mountain Time, 2 p.m. Eastern Time. Donny, will you be joining us again?
Happy to join. Thank you for having me, Jane.
Yeah. Yes. Well, we're going to be joined also by the famed attorney Bonnie Klapper, who's a former prosecutor who actually put away cartel members and actually busted up an entire cartel. And she is going to be joining us for our trial coverage tomorrow, along with other notables. So please join us tomorrow on Unchained TV Facebook. Also, you can watch us right on our website, UnchainedTV.com. And please download our app if you care about animals. We are a new global streaming network for veganism, animal rights. We have more than 700 videos. And now we are launching with today's broadcast into live programming in the hopes of becoming the vegan CNN. We need our global village of animal lovers to support us by downloading the app, which you can download right on your phone. There it is, Unchained TV. You can see all the many videos that you can watch right there. You can also get it through UnchainedTV.com as a portal to the app. You can also get it on your Apple TV device, your Roku device, and your Amazon Fire Stick. So there's many ways to watch Unchained TV. And please join us tomorrow for our continuing coverage and be part of our greater effort to show the world what's really going on. I mean, at its heart, we are in a race against time to wake the world up, because the impact of animal agriculture on climate change is extraordinarily destructive, and it's not being discussed. It is the missing piece to the puzzle. Yes, we need to worry about fossil fuels too, but we also need to worry about the impact of animal agriculture. And that's just one of the many reasons why we are launching and we are growing our network. Thank you, Donny Moss of TheirTurn.net, for being involved. We will see you tomorrow here on Unchained TV.